A master carpenter accidentally discovered a money laundering scheme that moved millions through overpriced construction projects. When he tried to quietly walk away, he realized he knew too much, and his family had become targets of a criminal organization willing to do anything to protect their secrets. This is the real story of how professional curiosity can put us at the center of dangerous conspiracies and how some discoveries change our lives forever. Leave in the comments, would you expose $1 million scheme knowing it would put your family at risk? Chapter 1. Mike Thompson had been working with wood for 24 years, but he had never landed a contract as prestigious as the Grandview Luxury Complex project. At 46 years old, the master carpenter had built a solid reputation for delivering high-quality millwork and custom carpentry that satisfied even the most demanding clients. Living in a comfortable suburban home with his wife Sarah, whom he had married 20 years ago, and their 2 children, 16-year-old Jake and 14-year-old Emma, Mike had always provided a stable middle-class lifestyle through his skilled craftsmanship and attention to detail. Mike's expertise in both traditional joinery and modern construction techniques had made him one of the most sought-after master carpenters in the region. His workshop was equipped with both precision machinery and hand tools that had been passed down through generations of craftsmen, allowing him to tackle projects that required both efficiency and artisanal quality. Recently, Mike had been studying advanced woodworking techniques through Ted's Woodworking, a comprehensive system that was helping him understand how master craftsmen could transition from project work to running sophisticated custom shops that catered to high-end clients. The detailed business guides were showing him how skilled carpenters could build sustainable enterprises that commanded premium rates for specialty work. The Grandview project came to Mike through his longtime business relationship with Pinnacle Construction, a major developer that specialized in luxury residential and commercial projects. The scope of work was impressive: custom millwork, built-in cabinetry, and specialty woodwork for a 12-building complex that would house some of the wealthiest families in the city. Mike, explained Tom Bradley, Pinnacle's project manager, during their initial meeting, this is the kind of project that could establish you as the premier custom carpenter in the region. The budget is generous, the timeline is reasonable, and the client wants only the finest craftsmanship available. The project specifications were indeed impressive. Each unit in the complex would feature custom-built cabinets, elaborate crown molding, handcrafted built-ins, and specialty woodwork that would require master-level skills to execute properly. The total carpentry budget exceeded anything Mike had worked with in his entire career. The developer, Luxury Developments, Inc., has specifically requested that all woodwork be executed to museum-quality standards, Tom continued. Cost is not a primary concern, but quality and craftsmanship are absolutely critical. Mike accepted the project enthusiastically, seeing it as the opportunity he had been working toward for 2 decades. The contract would provide steady, well-paying work for nearly 18 months, and the prestige of the Grandview project would likely lead to similar high-end opportunities in the future. Mike's first weeks on the Grandview project proceeded smoothly. The quality standards were indeed demanding, but his years of experience and the advanced techniques he had been studying allowed him to meet even the most challenging specifications. The custom millwork required precision that tested his skills, but the results were some of the finest woodwork he had ever created. It was during his 3rd week on the project that Mike first noticed something unusual about the way materials and labor costs were being handled. The lumber specifications called for premium hardwoods that were significantly more expensive than necessary for the project's requirements, and the quantities being ordered seemed excessive, even accounting for waste and future maintenance needs. When Mike mentioned his observations to Tom Bradley, the project manager's response was both dismissive and oddly defensive. "Mike, The client has very specific requirements about material quality and having adequate reserves for future needs. Our job is to execute their vision, not to second-guess their investment decisions. But Mike's experience in estimating material costs told him that something was fundamentally wrong with the project's economics. The lumber alone was costing nearly twice what similar projects required, and the labor estimates seemed inflated in ways that didn't correspond to the actual complexity of the work. Mike's curiosity about the project's unusual economics was heightened when he observed the delivery and payment procedures that Pinnacle was using. Materials were being delivered in quantities that far exceeded immediate needs, and payments to subcontractors were often made in cash, rather than the checks or electronic transfers that were standard in the construction industry. Most puzzling was the fact that Luxury Developments, Inc. seemed unconcerned about cost overruns that would have alarmed any legitimate developer. When the hardwood flooring installation exceeded its budget by 30% due to design changes, the additional costs were approved immediately without the extensive documentation that such changes normally required. Mike began paying closer attention to the financial aspects of the project, using his knowledge of construction costs to analyze whether the Grandview project's expenses made sense for a legitimate luxury development. What he discovered would soon put him and his family in mortal danger. The lumber costs alone were inflated by approximately 200% above market rates, with the excess being justified through technical specifications that required premium materials where standard materials would have been perfectly adequate. Labor costs were similarly inflated, with work that should have taken 1 carpenter a day being billed as requiring 3 carpenters for 2 days. But perhaps most suspicious was the pattern of subcontractor payments that Mike observed. Companies would be paid large sums for work that was either never completed or completed at a fraction of the build cost, with the difference apparently disappearing into accounts that had no connection to the actual construction work. Mike realized that he was witnessing what appeared to be a sophisticated money laundering operation disguised as a legitimate luxury development project. Criminal proceeds were being cleaned by passing them through inflated construction contracts, creating the appearance of legitimate business expenses while actually transferring illegal money into the legal financial system. The discovery was both fascinating and terrifying. Mike had stumbled upon evidence of a criminal conspiracy that involved millions of dollars and multiple companies, but he had also placed himself in a position where his knowledge made him a potential threat to powerful and dangerous people. That evening, as Mike sat in his workshop reviewing the project specifications and cost estimates that had revealed the money laundering scheme, he thought about the comfortable life he had built for his family and the risks that his discovery might pose to their safety. Sarah found him there at midnight, surrounded by spreadsheets and construction documents that told a story of corruption on a scale that neither of them had ever imagined. "Mike, what's wrong? You've been acting strange since you started this new project." For the first time since discovering the financial irregularities at Grandview, Mike shared his suspicions with someone he trusted completely. As he explained what he had observed about the inflated costs and suspicious payment patterns, Sarah's expression grew increasingly alarmed. "Mike, if this is really a money laundering operation, these people won't hesitate to hurt anyone who threatens their business. You need to be very careful about how you handle this information." Mike knew his wife was right, but he also understood that simply walking away from the project might not be sufficient to ensure his family's safety. He had already seen too much, and his sudden departure might trigger suspicions that could put them all at risk. The question was whether Mike could find a way to extract himself and his family from a dangerous situation without triggering a confrontation with criminals who had millions of dollars at stake and the resources to eliminate anyone who threatened their operations. Chapter 2. Mike's attempts to distance himself from the Grandview project while maintaining the appearance of normal business operations proved more difficult than he had anticipated. The money laundering scheme he had discovered was apparently much larger and more sophisticated than a single luxury development, and his role as master carpenter had given him access to information that the criminal organization could not afford to have exposed. Over the next 2 weeks, Mike carefully documented the evidence of financial irregularities he had observed, hoping to build a record that might protect his family if the criminals discovered his knowledge of their operations. But his investigation also revealed the true scope of what he had stumbled into. Luxury Developments, Inc. was not just one corrupt company, but part of a network of businesses that were systematically laundering money through construction projects throughout the region. The Grandview complex was just one of at least 6 developments where legitimate construction work was being used to disguise the movement of criminal proceeds. The inflated costs Mike had noticed were part of a sophisticated system where criminal organizations could convert illegal cash into apparently legitimate business income. A drug trafficking operation might generate millions in untraceable currency, but by paying those millions to construction companies for luxury materials and craftsmanship, the money could be deposited in banks and invested in legal businesses. Mike's analysis of the project's financial records suggested that the Grandview complex alone was being used to launder approximately $15 million over the course of its 18-month construction timeline. The actual construction costs were probably less than half the project's stated budget, with the remainder being criminal proceeds disguised as legitimate business expenses. But Mike also discovered that his own reputation and expertise were being used to validate the inflated costs. When auditors or investigators questioned why carpentry work was so expensive, they were told that the project required master-level craftsmanship from one of the region's most respected carpenters. Mike's name and reputation were being used to justify criminal financial transactions. The realization that he was being used as an unwitting front for a money laundering operation made Mike determined to find a way to expose the scheme without putting his family at risk. But his attempts to gather evidence were noticed by people who were paid to watch for exactly that kind of suspicious behavior. Tom Bradley approached Mike on a Thursday morning with a conversation that made it clear his activities had been detected. "Mike, I've been hearing some concerns about your level of interest in the project's financial details. Some people are wondering why a carpenter needs to know so much about material costs and payment procedures." "I've always kept track of project costs," Mike replied carefully. "It helps me estimate future projects and understand whether my work is meeting budget expectations." "That's commendable, Mike, but this project has some unique financial arrangements that don't require your oversight. I think it would be better if you focused on the carpentry work and left the business management to people who are trained for that responsibility." The warning was polite but unmistakable. Mike's curiosity about the project's finances had been noticed, and he was being told to stop asking questions that might reveal information the criminal organization wanted to keep hidden. That afternoon, Mike received a visit at his workshop from 2 men who introduced themselves as business associates of Luxury Developments, Inc. Their conversation removed any doubt about the dangerous nature of the situation Mike had stumbled into. "Mr. Thompson," said the older man, who had the calm demeanor of someone accustomed to conducting intimidating conversations, "we understand that you're a thorough professional who takes pride in understanding every aspect of the projects you work on. We respect that kind of dedication. However," continued the younger man, "some projects involve business relationships that are confidential and don't require input from contractors. We hope you understand the importance of focusing on your carpentry work and avoiding unnecessary curiosity about matters that don't concern you." Mike felt his blood run cold as he realized that criminals who laundered millions of dollars would not hesitate to eliminate a carpenter who threatened their operations. "I'm just trying to do good work on the project," Mike said. "I don't have any interest in business matters that don't affect my carpentry." "We're glad to hear that," the older man replied, "because we've invested significant resources in this project and we need to be certain that everyone involved understands the importance of discretion and cooperation." The men left without making any explicit threats, but their message was clear. Mike had been identified as a potential security risk, and his activities were being monitored by people who would not tolerate any interference with their criminal operations. That evening, Mike called a family meeting to discuss the situation that was threatening their safety and security. Sitting around their kitchen table, Mike explained to Sarah, Jake, and Emma that his work on the Grandview project had inadvertently exposed him to dangerous criminals who might view their family as a liability. "Dad, are we in real danger?" asked Emma, who at 14 was old enough to understand the seriousness of the situation. "I don't know yet," Mike replied honestly. "But we need to be prepared for the possibility that these people might try to hurt us to protect their business." Jake, who was 16 and had always looked up to his father's professional integrity, asked the question that Mike had been dreading. "Dad, what are you going to do about what you found?" Mike looked at his family, thinking about the comfortable life they had built together and the criminals who were now threatening everything they valued. He also thought about the millions of dollars in criminal proceeds that were being laundered through projects that bore his name and reputation. "I don't know yet," Mike said, "but I can't pretend I didn't see what I saw, and I can't let these people continue using my work to hide their crimes." The decision to take action against a criminal organization with millions of dollars at stake and the willingness to kill anyone who threatened them would prove to be the most dangerous choice of Mike's life. But it was also the only choice that would allow him to look at himself in the mirror without seeing someone who had helped criminals profit from their illegal activities. What do you think about Mike's situation? Should he have walked away immediately when he first noticed the suspicious financial activity? Or do you understand why he felt compelled to investigate further? Leave your opinion in the comments about how you would handle discovering such a massive criminal scheme. Chapter 3. Mike's decision to take action against the money laundering operation required careful planning and absolute secrecy. The criminals had already demonstrated that they were monitoring his activities, and any obvious move toward law enforcement would likely result in immediate retaliation against his family. But Mike also understood that simply trying to distance himself from the Grandview project would not ensure his family's safety. He had already seen too much evidence of the criminal scheme, and the organization would not risk allowing him to remain free with knowledge that could destroy their operations. Over the next week, Mike began secretly documenting every aspect of the money laundering scheme he had discovered. Using his legitimate access to project files and construction sites, he photographed financial records, copied suspicious contracts, and recorded conversations that revealed the scope of the criminal operations. The evidence Mike gathered painted a picture of systematic corruption that went far beyond what he had initially suspected. The money laundering network included not just construction companies, but also banks, accounting firms, and government officials who facilitated the movement of criminal proceeds through apparently legitimate business transactions. Mike discovered that Luxury Developments Inc. was connected to at least 12 other companies that were being used to launder money from drug trafficking, human trafficking, and other criminal enterprises. The total amount of illegal money being processed through construction projects exceeded $50 million annually. But perhaps most disturbing was Mike's discovery that several law enforcement officials were being paid to protect the money laundering operations from investigation. The criminal organization had corrupted police officers, prosecutors, and even federal agents who were supposed to be investigating financial crimes. During this period of secret investigation, Mike found himself relying heavily on the business knowledge he had been developing through his study of Ted's woodworking. The comprehensive guides included sections on financial management and business relationships that helped Mike understand how legitimate construction businesses should operate, making it easier for him to identify the criminal deviations he was witnessing. The contrast between the ethical business practices outlined in Ted's woodworking and the corruption he was documenting at Grandview reinforced Mike's determination to expose the criminal scheme, regardless of the personal risks involved. But Mike's investigation was taking place under increasingly dangerous circumstances. The business associates who had visited his workshop were now conducting regular surveillance of his family, and Mike noticed strange vehicles parked near his children's schools and Sarah's workplace. The pressure intensified when Tom Bradley approached Mike with an offer that was clearly designed to test his loyalty to the criminal organization. "Mike, I've been impressed with your professionalism and discretion on the Grandview project. There are other developments in the pipeline that could use someone with your skills and understanding of how our business operations work." The other developments Tom described would have provided Mike with enough work to keep him busy for the next 5 years, all at premium rates that would make him one of the highest-paid carpenters in the region. But accepting the work would also make him a full participant in the money laundering scheme, with criminal liability that would prevent him from ever exposing what he had discovered. "That sounds like a great opportunity," Mike replied carefully. "Can I have some time to review my schedule and get back to you?" "Of course, but I should mention that these opportunities are time-sensitive. Our partners prefer to work with people who can make quick decisions and commit fully to our projects." Mike understood that he was being offered a choice: become a willing participant in the criminal enterprise or be eliminated as a security risk. The criminals were giving him one last chance to join their organization before they decided that his knowledge made him too dangerous to allow to live. That night, Mike made contact with Special Agent Maria Rodriguez, a federal investigator he had met during a previous construction project that had involved insurance fraud. Without revealing his current situation directly, Mike arranged for Agent Rodriguez to receive sealed packages of evidence that would be automatically delivered if he failed to check in on a regular schedule. Mike's evidence packages included photographs of financial records, copies of suspicious contracts, recordings of conversations that established the criminal nature of the construction projects, and detailed analysis of how the money laundering scheme operated. Most importantly, the packages included information about the corrupt law enforcement officials who were protecting the criminal organization. Call to action. If Agent Rodriguez received the evidence packages, it would mean that Mike had been killed or disappeared, triggering a federal investigation that would expose the entire money laundering network. But Mike also realized that his family's safety depended on more than just posthumous justice. He needed to find a way to expose the criminals while keeping his wife and children alive. During this desperate period, Mike often thought about how different his situation might be if he had the financial independence that systems like Ted's woodworking could provide to skilled craftsmen. Instead of being trapped in a project with criminals because he needed the income, he could have built his own client base of ethical customers who valued quality work over questionable financial arrangements. If you're tired of being forced into compromising situations just to pay the bills, discover how Ted's woodworking can give you the independence to choose only projects that align with your values. Click here to learn how thousands of craftsmen have built profitable businesses based on integrity rather than desperation. Mike's plan for exposing the money laundering operation while protecting his family required coordination with federal agents who were not compromised by the criminal organization. Agent Rodriguez had confirmed that she could provide protection for Mike's family if he could deliver evidence that would justify federal intervention in what appeared to be local business operations. The breakthrough came when Mike discovered that the criminal organization was planning to eliminate him within the next week. A conversation he overheard between Tom Bradley and one of the business associates made their intentions unmistakably clear. The Carpenter has become a liability. He knows too much about our financial arrangements, and his recent behavior suggests that he might be gathering information for outside parties. How do you want to handle the situation? Clean and permanent. It needs to look like an accident, and his family needs to understand that discussing his work would be very dangerous for them. Mike realized that he had less than a week to expose the criminal organization before they killed him and threatened his family into silence. His only chance for survival was to provide federal agents with enough evidence to arrest the entire network before they could eliminate him. Thank you so much for staying with us this far in this incredible story. We truly appreciate your dedication as a viewer, and believe me, the best is yet to come. What follows will show us how Mike's desperate gamble to expose the criminals led to one of the most complex federal investigations in construction crime history. Will be Chapter 4. Mike's final week on the Grandview project was a race against time to gather enough evidence for federal intervention while avoiding detection by criminals who were planning to kill him. The surveillance of his family had intensified, and Mike knew that any obvious contact with law enforcement would trigger immediate retaliation. But Mike also realized that his position as master carpenter gave him access to information that the criminal organization couldn't obtain anywhere else. His expertise in construction costs and project management had allowed him to understand the money laundering scheme in ways that even financial investigators might miss. Using his legitimate access to project sites and records, Mike began systematically documenting the entire network of companies and individuals involved in the criminal operations. His carpentry work provided perfect cover for visiting multiple construction sites, allowing him to photograph evidence at locations throughout the region. The scope of what Mike uncovered was staggering. The money laundering network included over 30 companies, hundreds of bank accounts, and criminal proceeds from sources that ranged from drug trafficking to international arms dealing. The construction projects were just one component of a sophisticated financial system that moved illegal money around the world. Most importantly, Mike discovered the names and evidence of corruption involving 17 law enforcement officials who were being paid to protect the criminal organization. This information would be crucial to ensuring that his evidence reached federal agents who were not compromised by the criminals. But Mike's investigation was taking place under conditions of extreme danger. The criminals had moved beyond surveillance to active harassment, designed to test his reactions and gather information about his intentions. Sarah was followed home from work by men who made no attempt to hide their presence. Jake and Emma were approached at school by strangers who asked questions about their father's work and made comments about family safety. The message was clear. The criminal organization was prepared to hurt Mike's family if he became a threat to their operations. The psychological pressure was enormous, but Mike also understood that backing down would not ensure his family's safety. The criminals had already decided that his knowledge made him too dangerous to allow to live, and their current harassment was designed to control his behavior until they were ready to eliminate him permanently. It was during this period of maximum danger that Mike received an unexpected contact that would change everything. Agent Rodriguez called him with information that suggested federal law enforcement had been aware of the money laundering network for months and was preparing to take action. Mr. Thompson, we've been monitoring some of the companies you've been working with, and we're concerned about your safety. Would it be possible for us to meet discreetly to discuss your observations about their business practices? Mike realized that his evidence packages had already reached the FBI and triggered an investigation that was much larger than he had imagined. Federal agents had been building a case against the money laundering network, but they needed insider information from someone who understood how the construction projects were being used to disguise criminal financial transactions. The meeting with Agent Rodriguez took place in a secure federal facility where Mike could provide his evidence without risk of surveillance by the criminal organization. What Mike learned during the briefing revealed that his discovery of the money laundering scheme had been the missing piece that federal investigators needed to understand how the criminal network operated. Mr. Thompson, your analysis of the construction costs and project management has given us insight into this organization that we couldn't obtain through traditional financial investigation. Your expertise in legitimate construction practices has allowed you to identify the specific ways these criminals are manipulating project costs to launder money. Agent Rodriguez explained that federal law enforcement had been aware of suspicious financial activity involving construction companies, but they hadn't understood how skilled craftsmen were being used to validate inflated costs that disguised criminal proceeds. Your evidence shows us that these criminals specifically target respected professionals like yourself to provide credibility for their fake business expenses. When auditors question why carpentry work costs twice the normal rate, they're told that the project requires master-level craftsmanship from someone with your reputation. Mike's documentation had also revealed the corruption of local law enforcement officials in ways that federal investigators hadn't been able to detect through other means. His recordings of conversations and photographs of financial records provided evidence that would allow federal agents to arrest corrupt officials who had been protecting the criminal organization. But Agent Rodriguez also warned Mike that his cooperation with federal law enforcement would make him an even higher priority target for the criminal organization. These people have killed federal witnesses before, Mr. Thompson. If you decide to testify against them, we can provide protection for you and your family, but you need to understand that your lives will be permanently changed. Mike thought about the comfortable suburban life he had built with Sarah, Jake, and Emma, and about the career he had spent 2 decades developing. Cooperating with federal law enforcement would mean giving up everything familiar and starting over in a new location with new identities. But Mike also thought about the millions of dollars in criminal proceeds that were being laundered through projects that bore his name, and about the other skilled professionals who might be trapped in similar situations without understanding the true nature of their work. Agent Rodriguez, if I don't cooperate with your investigation, these people will kill me anyway to protect their secret. At least if I testify, there's a chance that my family will be safe and these criminals will be stopped. The decision to become a federal witness against a criminal organization with millions of dollars at stake and connections to corrupt law enforcement officials would test every principle Mike had developed during his career as a master craftsman. But it was also the only choice that offered any hope for justice and safety for his family. Mike's expertise in construction and project management would prove crucial to federal prosecutors in explaining to juries how sophisticated financial crimes were being hidden behind apparently legitimate business activities. His testimony would help send dozens of criminals to prison and recover tens of millions of dollars in proceeds from illegal activities. But the personal cost of that testimony would be enormous, requiring Mike and his family to abandon everything they had built and start over in a new location with new identities, protected by federal marshals from criminals who would never stop trying to kill the carpenter who had exposed their million-dollar secret. Chapter 5. The federal prosecution of the money laundering network that Mike had exposed became one of the largest financial crime cases in the region's history, involving over 40 defendants and the recovery of more than $60 million in criminal proceeds. Mike's testimony was crucial to helping juries understand how sophisticated financial crimes were disguised as legitimate construction activities. But the victory came at an enormous personal cost. Mike and his family had been forced to enter the federal witness protection program, abandoning their comfortable suburban life and starting over in a distant state with new identities and the constant knowledge that criminals were still searching for the Carpenter who had destroyed their operations. The house they left behind, the workshop where Mike had perfected his craft over 2 decades, the schools where Jake and Emma had grown up with their friends. All of it became part of a life that Mike Thompson could never return to. The family had to become the Andersons, living in a small town where nobody knew about Mike's previous reputation as a master carpenter. During the trial, Mike had learned the full scope of the criminal enterprise he had accidentally discovered. The money laundering network had processed over $200 million in illegal proceeds over a 5-year period, funding everything from international drug trafficking to terrorist organizations. The construction projects were just one component of a financial system that enabled some of the world's most dangerous criminal activities. Mike's evidence had been crucial, not just to prosecuting the criminals he had encountered, but to exposing the broader network of corruption that had allowed the money laundering scheme to operate undetected for years. 17 law enforcement officials were convicted of corruption charges, and dozens of businesses were shut down for their roles in processing criminal proceeds. But perhaps most importantly, Mike's case had led to new federal guidelines for monitoring construction projects that might be used for money laundering. His expertise in identifying inflated costs and suspicious financial practices had helped law enforcement develop tools for detecting similar schemes before they could process millions in criminal proceeds. The psychological adjustment to their new life was difficult for the entire family. Sarah had to abandon her career and friends to start over in a community where she knew nobody. Jake and Emma lost their childhood friends and had to rebuild their social lives while carrying the secret of why their family had been forced to relocate. For Mike, the challenge was not just starting over professionally, but finding meaning in work that felt disconnected from the expertise and reputation he had spent decades building. As Mike Anderson, he was just another carpenter looking for work in a small town, without the master-level reputation that had defined his professional identity. It was during this difficult transition that Mike's investment in learning advanced woodworking techniques through Ted's Woodworking proved to be the foundation for rebuilding his career. The comprehensive skills and business knowledge he had developed allowed him to establish himself quickly in his new community, even without being able to reference his previous reputation. Mike began taking on custom furniture projects and specialty woodworking that showcased skills that were rare in his new location. The precision techniques and business principles from Ted's Woodworking helped him build a client base that valued quality craftsmanship over local connections or established reputation. Within 18 months of relocating, Mike had established Anderson Custom Woodworking as one of the premier furniture and millwork shops in the region. His advanced skills allowed him to command premium rates for work that local competitors couldn't match, proving that master-level craftsmanship could build a successful business anywhere.